Alright, hello. It's your Scottish Rebel here, Scotland's ambassador, Celtic Maddie, and Glasgow Genuine. Alright. So, I'm back to Scotland. I've been at a Celtic title decider, as you know. So, let's go through it straight away. I start straight away. So, what do you think? I'm just going to sum this all up, So Celtics, the champions again. That's the fact. That's well-known fact. I'm going to shut up broken hearts of Midlothian. So it's Ibrox stands, zombies. So it's media's bias and bish. Alright. As you know, there are moments in football and history. It doesn't just happen. Quietly in the background. Sometimes history walks just right onto the pitch, plans is green and white, flag onto ground that tells everybody else in the country exactly where they stand. This season, let's face it, this season was a bit hard for Celtic, pure hard for Celtic. Much had happened. Celtic were struggling. Managerial issue, squad issue, and transfers issue, But this season was one of those moments. Celtic winning 5 titles in a row. That's the fact. 5 titles in a row, man. Wasn't a luck. No circumstance. It's just not some grand conspiracy, man, that cooked up in fever dreams of bitter rivals. It was the result of the... So I'm going to mention that, sorry. It was a result of mentality, of the standards, right? Of the resilience. And the relentless refusal to die. Which only true champions possess. So, and I have to say this. Let me tell you this, that I haven't told that. This straight for the heart, listening to the noise of certain concerns and passion and greetings, man. But the past few weeks has been absolutely glorious, man. The media scrambling for drama. Hearts fan convincing themselves they were about to witness some great change in, Hearts were thinking that they're going to be champions, but they even prepared a champions bus to celebrate. It was like glorious Hearts. Are we champions? No. Celtic is a champion. Yet again. 5th in a row. The Ibrox support. Clinging to every wee fantasy like that. Somehow Celtic. Every time Celtic wins is a controversy with them. Somehow Celtic could collapse under pressure. All that noise, man. All that chest thumping. All that arrogance. And then Celtic arrived. This was what this title, man. So I've been there. What a magic atmosphere, man. Almost in the last minutes of the game. I'm serious. I almost got a heart attack. It gave me a heart attack. Seriously, man. I was standing like that. Oh my god. Yes, I was satisfying for me, It wasn't simply one. It was seized. So Deacon wrestled back and decided to know exactly what it means to wear the jersey. When the pressure is that high, isn't it? Other clubs, trust me, can talk about projects and progress, natural victories, moral victories. Oh, they like, man. Celtic deal in trophies. Celtic deal in history. Celtic deal in moments that live forever. The final scratch. Alright, the final scratch of that season. Tell the whole story. Let me tell you that. Hearts were playing. Hey, the media practically. Hearts were riding high in April. But shut down by Celtic in May. The media practically had their red carpet rolled out for them, so every headline was preparing the fairy tale, the glorious hearts. Every pundit was desperate to build a narrative that Celtic's dominance was finally over. Let me tell you this, you could almost hear the excitement, you know. You could almost hear the excitement of their voices and that. So because they thought they had finally found someone ready to knock the champions off their perch. No. But this is where people continually fail to understand Celtic, alright? This club doesn't panic. This club ambush a rival and wait patiently in green and white shadow and then attack when the moment is right. Celtic wait, Celtic absorb pressure, right? Celtic stay alive. And then when the moment is right, proper, when the moment comes, Celtic strike straight at the throat. Smash the rivals. You were riding high in April. Shot down in May, as I mentioned. That line, not sum up, it's almost poetic, but that line sum up it any better. Hearts fought momentum would carry them over at a line. You know, momentum means absolutely nothing when you're up against serial winners. Celtic have players and supporters and, you know, who know exactly what these moments demand. The mentality is this football club is built differently. This is how, when the pressure became unbearable, trust me, bearable, when every pass mattered, when every minute carried the weight of a season, Celtic stood tallest once again. And what I loved most, that sheer inevitability of it all. You could see the fear creeping among the rivals. You know, they knew deep down. They knew that they all knew. No matter how much noise they made, no matter how many desperate claims were thrown around, Celtic were coming like goals, dramatic moments, refusing to surrender. This isn't luck. This is the mentality of champions. This is years building a culture where winning isn't celebrated as some miracle. It is demanded. The late goals this season, let me tell you that, perfectly captured the soul of the team again and again. Celtic dragged themselves the line because they simply refused to accept failure. Other teams celebrate draws against rivals like cup finals as fucking zombies. Zombies. I hope you remember that. Was Danny Roll Sausage Roll, and the manager of Zombies said to them that they should treat every game as a cup final. So they got 5 days in a row hide. Pure funny. Almost beat myself there. Celtic tear themselves apart every drop points because the standards are so. Let me tell you this, much more higher here. This is the difference. That's always been the difference. And now comes the bitterness. Alright. The bitterness, that bitterness, man. Suddenly every excuse imaginable is being thrown around. Complaints, conspiracies, moaning about referees, moaning about celebrations, moaning about fans, moaning about absolutely everything except the actual football itself, man. Because the truth is, let me tell you that, painfully simple for them. Celtic were the best team in the country once again. This is what hurts them the most. The funniest part of that for me was that the funniest part for me has been hard. The absolute state of some of the reactions after losing the title race. Weeks of swagger, confidence on to aid up watching Celtic celebrate again. The claims, the outrage, the attempts to paint themselves as victims afterwards. Honestly, it's just reeks of a club, you know. Unable to cope with reality. If you want to win titles, you know, you need to handle pressure. You need bottle, alright? You need composure. And then the defining moment arrived. Celtic had it. Didn't they? I saw the Ibrox crowd, zombies in it. And Meryl County had be said on a stage, so seriously, every single season begins. Like the declaration is this is the year. This is the year. No. Every summer they convince themselves that the balance of power is shifting. Every season the media buys into it. And every season Celtic end up stoning there. Celebrating their once with the rest of the Scottish football looks for excuse. 5 in a row, man. This is a fucking fact, you know. So better remember this. Read that again. 5 in a row. 5 in a row, man. In the modern era of football, all the scrutiny, all the pressure, and all the attempts to stop them. This is extraordinary, man. People should appreciate just how difficult it actually is. Maintaining hunger after one title is hard enough. But maintaining is after 5 requires something special inside the football club. It requires leaders. Requires standards. Requires players who understand exactly what the badge means. This is how Celtic deserve these titles more than anybody else. Because let me tell you how. Not because of entitlement, not because of history alone, but because Celtic consistently rise to the occasion while others crumble under the weight of expectation, right? Celtic supporters demand excellence every single week. The pressure of the club is relentless. Yet season after season, the players deliver. And I think this is what terrifies rivals most of all. I can't understand that hatred towards us. I can't understand it. This just doesn't feel like the end of the cycle. It feels like Celtic are getting stronger again. You can see the mentality, the squad. You can see the hunger for the supporters. You can see it in the way that keeps finding ways to win matches at club most. Champions aren't defined, let me tell you that, because champions are not defined to easy victories. Champions are defined by what to do when pressure is suffocating them. Celtic looked pressure right in the eye in the season left. The scenes after a title win, it was the family banner of Celtic fans, and I spotted it. I wrote my article about it as well. They were riding high. I called my latest article, I called it, you were riding high in April, broken hearts. But sorry, beaten, shut down in May. But Celtic, the champions. Mark me. This is our title said everything on. Plus the banners, the Celtic fans. Directed to McInnes, it was like, if being a fanny was a work. Look, pure emotion, man, pure release, pure sports born their hearts. Because I didn't know how hard this one was for. And despite all that peril clutching for certain sections in that, the media afterwards, the celebration of football, raw, emotional, passionate football. Celtic supporters have every right to celebrate historic achievement. And that is another thing that bothers people, isn't it? Celtic support the skill, the passionate, the power of it. When Celtic succeeds, the country feels it. The noise becomes deafening. The celebrations become unforgettable. The rivals can't stand it because they know no support in Scotland comes remotely close when Celtic are truly alive and roaring. This title, let me tell you that, this title wasn't just another league win. It was an statement, a reminder, a warning. You can build narratives all season long. You can hype up challenges, you can pray for collapse. If you're going to take that title away for Celtic, you better be prepared to kill them stone dead, because if there is even the slightest opening left, Celtic will come storming through it. It's exactly what happened again. And now, the same media have spent months desperate for a different outcome. Are left trying to precise the reality, staring at the right and the face. Celtic remain a dominant force in Scottish football. Not through luck, not through politics, through winning football matches when it matters most. So, here we are, 5 in a row. history written once more by the biggest football club in Scotland. Another chapter added. That story that never stopped growing. That never stops growing. And for all the tears, outrage, and bitterness, and mourning elsewhere, nothing changes, man. The only fact that truly matters is when the pressure reached its highest point, Celtic stood up proudly, while everybody else fell away. Sorry, that's a fact. This is how they're champions. This is how they deserve every title. That is exactly what the rest of the. That is exactly what the rest of them can't stand it. Right. So. Let me move on to the Celtic Constitutional Convention, because, as you know, summing up my latest video, Westminster is broken, riots all over the country. But the news is the leaders of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, the Prime Ministers, First Ministers, they just met to negotiate the Celtic Alliance, Celtic Nations Alliance, in order to regain independence, alright? So, you're fighting, we have a square go. Scotland is going for it. And trust me that. As I'm saying that as Scotland ambassador, as a Scottish rebel, that even a Ginger Witch, I'm sure you remember that one as well. I'm telling you this. That may happen. That will happen. That Scotland will be independent country. Independent and sovereign country at last, you know. So, that will be pure and nice because there's a. The second thing is that the First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney, he just gathered a meeting concerning Scotland's independence, so just for voting that. So, and there are talks about Celtic constitutional. I always forget one. Celtic Constitutional Convention. That'll be brilliant as well. Alright, the emergence of so-called Celtic Nations Alliance is politically, let me tell you that, fascinating because whether it's formal or informal, it reflects the thing, something deeper than just building for years across these islands and growing belief in Scotland, Wales and increasing parts of Northern Ireland. That the constitutional status quo inside the UK no longer reflects democratic reality. And it matters enormously for Scotland. How? There's no why it matters enormously for Scotland. Because for the first time in modern British political history, the constitutional question is no longer isolated to Scotland alone, but it's no longer the Scottish issue. It's becoming a wider conversation about the structure and legitimacy of the UK itself. Let me remind you. Let's go back to the 2014 when Scotland alone pushed for independence. Westminster said no, of course. They said no all the time. Fucking pigs. Could portray it as a singular nationalist movement. But when Scotland, Wales and large sections of Northern Ireland all begin questioning the union simultaneously, see the difference? The political dynamic changes. It stops looking like a regional grievance. It starts looking like a systematic constitutional instability. So the symbolism matters too. The term Celtic nations carries emotional, historical, and cultural weight. Certain nations with distinct identities, histories, languages, political traditions, and that long predate as a modern UK state. Scotland and Wales inclusive vote very differently for England politically, while Northern Ireland exists under a quiet unique constitutional arrangement through the Good Friday Agreement. So when leaders for these nations meet and discuss cooperation, autonomy, constitutional futures and democratic rights, what it signals actually, let me tell you that, what it signals, something bigger than day-to-day politics now. It signals the possibility of the shared constitutional movement. What does it mean for Scotland? For Scotland specifically, it normalises independence as a part of broader democratic debate rather than isolated nationalist cause. It weakens Westminster's ability to frame Scottish independence as uniquely religious or fringe. Alright, it creates opportunities in that for political coordination, that issues like devolved powers, Brexit damage, the trade, energy, constitutional reform. It increases pressure on the British state because multiple constitutional fronts become active simultaneously. So now, does this mean Scotland suddenly has an inevitable or guaranteed path to independence? No, that would be overstating it. Scotland still faces the central constitutional obstacle that has existed in the Supreme Court ruling in 2022. Westminster Rats controls the legal mechanisms. It recognised referendum and then just politically, Labour and the Conservatives, now, as far as I'm concerned, remain opposed to another vote in the near future. But politically and psychologically, the ground has shifted. Let me tell you that. You know, can you sense that? So as me, a Scottish ginger witch. This is where I go. Real significance lies. Because independence movements succeed not merely through one election or one speech, one utterance, but they succeed when the existing constitutional model begins to crack, begins to lose moral authority. When people stop believing the current arrangement represents them. When the state begins to feel like politically mismatched to the democratic identity of the nation inside it. So Brexit accelerated that dramatically, let me tell you that. So I started that. I keep hearing people laugh at the idea of Celtic Nations Alliance, especially those doubters and unionists supporting shitey Union and UK thing. This is some romantic fantasy. Some way fringe movement, some... I don't get it. How people laugh at the idea of the Celtic Nations Alliance. I don't get it. They say some romantic fantasy. Some people say that Haraway fringe movement. It's a big dream built on poetry, flags and history books. But I think people are missing a crucial thing. What's actually happening here? Because this isn't just symbolism anymore. It's politics shifting beneath the surface, of the UK itself. So, for years, Scotland was treated as a pawn. Let me tell you that. I think it's a proper thing to say here. As Scotland, it's a known fact that Scotland was always afterthought for Westminster. Scotland was afterthought for these rats. That's a fact. We better change it very soon. Scotland was treated as though we are the only nation questioning Westminster rule. The only nation asking difficult constitutional questions. The only nation supposedly causing division. Alright? But now look around. Scotland keeps electing pro-independence majorities. Wales, historically, far less nationalist politically, has seen support for independence rise dramatically over the last decade. And the pro-independence sentiment there is now firmly part of mainstream political discussions. Northern Ireland, the entire constitutional conversation there has fundamentally changed. That's over post-Brexit, man. So for the first time ever, Irish unity no longer feels like some distant hypothetical. It feels like an active constitutional possibility people openly discuss. There's a context people need to understand. When leaders for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland meet up and begin talking about cooperation as Celtic nations, it matters. Not because they are about to form some immediate political union tomorrow morning, but because the entire constitutional psychology of Britain is changing. I hate that word. The UK was always presented to us as stable, permanent, untouchable, but now it suddenly feels negotiable, you know. So that changes everything. Let's be honest here. Because one way people psychologically realize constitutional arrangement are not permanent, the fear starts to weaken. The fear has always been Westminster's greatest weapon against Scottish independence. Fear of uncertainty, fear of change, fear of standing alone, fear of economic transition, fear of breaking up Britain. So the Brexit chart, you know, tell me that Westminster never listened to Scotland. Never. I'm going to I'm going to repeat that, the phrase. Westminster never listened to Scotland. Never. And they're not going to listen at all in fucking ages. So it's high time Scotland be out with a fucking union with the rest of the Celtic nations. So I support that Celtic Nations Alliance. Brexit shattered the illusion that the UK it's a guaranteed stability, you know. That image was distracted. And I think it's broken now. There's an irony of the heart of this, all this. The same political establishment I told you that Scotland independence was too risky, you know, dragged Scotland out of the European Union against Scotland's democratic will. The contradiction so absolutely staggers me, you know. You know, for years we are lectured endlessly about the importance of the union, about period, about pooled resources, shared sovereignty, economic security, international cooperation. Then suddenly, the exact same people screamed, take back control, restore our sovereignty, leave the union. And apparently that principle, that mattered, that England wanted out of the EU. But Scotland didn't want out of the EU, you know, that's the difference. Because when Scotland talks about self-determination and say the UK, suddenly the language changes completely. Suddenly sovereignty becomes dangerous. Suddenly unions become sacred. Suddenly democracy has limits. Funny that, right? Scotland voted 62 remain. Northern Ireland voted 56 remain. Gibraltar voted 96 remain. Gibraltar as well was owned by UK. Didn't matter. No. But special state, no special status, no opt-out, no veto, no meaningful constitutional protection. We are dragged out anyway. Scotland was dragged out anyway. Against her will. Her people. And that exposed something fundamental about the UK that many people in Scotland have suspected that for years, but Brexit confirmed beyond argument that Westminster sovereignty ultimately means English numerical dominance. This is reality, man. People just hate hearing it said bluntly, you know. But it's true. England has the overwhelming majority of MPs. England determines most UK governments. England effectively decides the constitutional direction of the entire state. So, politicians talk about British democracy. Scotland, increasingly, here's something different, as per usual. The attitude stinks, it never changes. You can vote however you like, Scotland can vote however she likes, but England decides. This is constitutional crisis sitting underneath modern Britain. Because the UK presents itself emotionally as a partnership of our nations, and well, structurally, operating as a unitary state dominated by one nation numerically larger than all the others combined. And Brexit ripped the mask off that contradiction. Fucking better the gathered pish. 10 broken promises towards Scotland. Scotland agreed to remain the UK in 2014. Scotland voted to remain in the EU in 2016. True. But Scotland in 2014, and listen to that very, very pure carefully, but Scotland in 2014 was still remaining in the UK, guaranteed EU membership, stability, security, partnership, respect between nations. That was pish, unfortunately. 2 years later, Westminster fundamentally changed the constitutional reality of the UK without Scotland's consent. That matters massively, because democratic consent isn't a one-time event, frozen forever in history, frozen in time. It requires confirming legitimacy. And let me say this, and the legitimacy has been eroding ever since Brexit, man. Now, look, at Northern Ireland, for example, because this is incredibly important here. Economically, parts of Northern Ireland have actually performed relatively well in certain areas post-Brexit because of the unique trading arrangements, right? It measures growth outspaced many UK regions outside London. So, but polling still shows huge numbers of people there, including some Leave voters. But the Brexit has been damaging overall. Why? How that was? Because this was never purely about economics. It was about democratic agency. Let's face it. People don't like having constitutional futures imposed upon them. That's the lesson Westminster still refuses to understand. And it's exactly why support for Scottish independence refuses to disappear, no matter how aggressively it gets attacked politically or in the media. Because underneath the arguments about currency and that, the trade and the economics, it's something much deeper. Who gets to decide Scotland's future? That's the real question here. What Westminster do? Westminster still can't answer it convincingly. Because if sovereignty mattered for Brexit, then logically, self-determination must also matter for Scotland. Alright? You can't argue. I hate calling that it. British people have the democratic right to leave a political union, while simultaneously arguing the Scottish people don't. This is intellectual hypocrisy. That's the hypocrisy, alright? Either self-determination is a democratic principle, or isn't it? Westminster's position increasingly looks like this. Self-determination is admirable. Right? When it strengthens British sovereignty, not Scottish. Self-determination is dangerous when Scotland's, and listen to that, self-determination is dangerous when Scotland asks for it. The contradiction is becoming harder and harder to defend. This is how the idea of a Celtic constitutional convention matters too. And listen to that one. Because when people are now beginning to discuss openly, isn't it, merely Scottish independence and isolation, but the entire future constitutional structure of these islands. A Celtic Constitutional Convention, let me explain you that. Yeah. Whether formal or conceptual, it represents the idea that Scotland, Wales and the potential future United Ireland could coordinate discussions around sovereignty, democratic structures, economic cooperation and trade, energy, culture, constitutional rights outside the traditional Westminster's framework. This is politically significant, because it creates intellectual alternatives to the current UK model. And constitutional change always been there. First, people imagining alternatives. That's how political transformation happens. Not overnight, not magically, but gradually, incrementally, right? First, people whisper ideas. Then they debate them. Then they normalize them. And eventually, they vote on them. So, let me say that I genuinely think that we're living through one of those historical transition periods now. The old British political consensus is weakening. Brexit fractured it. Westminster chaos accelerated it. Repeated democratic divergence deepened it. Scotland keeps voting one way, England keeps voting another way. Westminster keeps insisting this is perfectly sustainable forever. But, no, man. No. Increasingly, people simply don't believe that anymore. This is the biggest point of all, man. Independence isn't it longer just about nationalism? The framing is outdated, For many people now, independence is about democratic functionality. It's about whether Scotland should have the ability to choose governments and political directions aligned with how Scotland votes. Because right now, we repeatedly get governments Scotland rejects. We repeatedly get constitutional changes Scotland rejects. We repeatedly got economic directions Scotland rejects. Yet we are constantly told this is democracy. And at some point people start asking, who's democracy, really? Because I don't get it. Because if Scotland can vote one way consistently for decades and still repeatedly receive another political direction imposed externally, then naturally the constitutional question intensifies. That is how this moment matters. So, not because independence is suddenly guaranteed tomorrow, but because the argument itself is evolving. Scotland is no longer merely arguing we are different. Scotland is increasingly arguing we are democratically constrained inside the system structurally, incapable of reflecting our political choices. This is for me a powerful constitutional argument, especially after Brexit, especially after Westminster chaos, especially if the issue of being held sovereignty matters enormously, right up until Scotland asks for it too. And maybe it's the biggest irony of all. Brexit was supposed to settle the sovereignty questions forever. Instead, it may ultimately have detonated the UK's own constitutional future. Let me tell you this, Scotland deserves to be an independent and sovereign nation. At last. So, Celtic Nations Alliance, just go for it and destroy the enemy, the UK. Because enemy must remember that he can take our lives, but he never takes our freedom. Alright, so I prepare your Scotland ambassador and Scottish rebel and Glasgow genuine Celtic Maddie. Prepare something smashing for you concerning Scottish politics, Scotland's independence and Celtic, of course, or something for history of Scotland. And I'll see you. This time, I'll see you next Saturday. So it'll be on 13th of May. I'll see you there. So have a pure to brilliant afternoon. And see yous. And yes, for Scotland.